Hi everyone, it is April, so time for another Zodiac themed painting. And this being April, it's time for Aries. So let's get started with this watercolor and oil pastel mixed media tutorial.
After doing my initial drawing, I am wetting the entire background with water. And note that I did my initial drawing in water-soluble graphite because I will be using watercolors first, and I do not want the graphite lines to show ostentatiously when I start painting. But that is not absolutely mandatory. Now I'm starting to put colors in the background, and you see I've chosen various colors in the shades of blue, magenta, reds, crimsons, and purples, and the darker variations of each. And this is because I want to kind of mimic the colors of galaxies in the background. But this stage of where I'm doing the watercolor is not absolutely mandatory. You could straight away go to oil pastels, because I will anyways cover almost entire portions with oil pastels separately. But what I find is an advantage of doing this watercolor layer before is it gives me an idea of what color to put where, and whether and how well that works. It kind of works as a mapping and where how I want to proceed with the painting, the colors, the value mapping, so a total guideline for that matter. So that's why I do this two-step technique. Also, I'm working on watercolor paper, or more precisely Strathmore cold press watercolor paper. Now watercolor paper is obviously meant for water, so I'm just taking the advantage of the materials here. And obviously if when I work on watercolor first and then I do oil pastel later, it kind of brings in the best of both worlds together. Also, when you work in this way, the actual watercolor paper is completely white, and when working with oil pastels I like the toned surface. So instead of toning the entire area with one color, I'm just creating a value map guideline. This watercolor layer, I do not spend a lot of time. I just create a visual outline or map, for that matter, like I already mentioned. And so I spent about 15-20 minutes depending on the size of the painting on this watercolor layer. But you could also do the watercolor in great detail and just top it up in some of the areas, not all of the areas, with oil pastels, and that ways it would even keep some of the watercolor factors, because I do like some of that, add some of that as well. When I did my Cancer painting, which was the first of this Zodiac series, I did retain some of the watercolor properties in the painting. Now I'm starting with my oil pastel, and you can see that wherever I put whatever color with oil pastels, I'm more or less putting the whatever color with watercolors, I'm more or less putting the same colors with oil pastel. Now somewhere I'm changing the color a little bit, somewhere I'm darkening it a little bit, somewhere I'll add some more layers on top of the same colors. So that's where the watercolor value map kind of guides me to show that, okay, this one looks really good, let's keep it this way. This one, maybe some changes would be even better. So that's what it works. After I put an initial layer of oil pastels, I am using my silicone clay shaper tool to blend all the colors. If I am not using any kind of blending medium, like odorless mineral spirits or linseed oil or something, then this is my go-to way of blending oil pastels. I do not dirty my hand. At the same time, it blends smoothly. Like even this kind of paper, like the cold press watercolor paper, it has a lot of tooth, a lot of texture, but this blender, the silicone shaper rather, clay shaper, takes care of all of the nooks and crannies and pushes the color very nicely inwards into all of those nooks and crannies, and helps you put more colors on top. So you could do a lot of layering with this tool, which obviously is my preferred way of painting. No matter what medium I'm working on, I love layering. I like putting colors in different layers and matching them with each other, or slowly building up the value. So on this particular painting, what happened is that I had a reference photo of the ram which had a light source coming from the top, whereas when I did this composition, this Aries lady has the fire in his hand, so that brings the light source in the front and the bottom. So that completely kind of changed the notion of the reference photo. So I had to manipulate the reference photo quite a bit, and in the attempt of doing so, I personally feel that in some of the areas I probably did not show the reflection of light or the light source from the right direction, but that I will forgive myself for doing that, because this is not necessarily 100% realistic painting. I'm going for a more surreal look, so that eventually will work out for me. But I just wanted to tell you, because many of you will notice that the light source is probably not perfectly logical in this painting, but I'm not painting anything very reasonable or rational too. Well, that will work. At least it works for me. You can let me know whether it works for me or not, or any thoughts you have on this painting in the comments below. I always appreciate any kind of comments or feedback, even if it is something that you don't like. Let me know, because that helps me improve. That makes me feel that people are kind of engaging with what I am creating. That is a huge big deal for an artist like me. So you can see that I'm working on the eye. This is the area which is a smaller area, and so when I'm working with the Holbein oil pastel, since they have a square surface and I could use the sharper edges, it helps a lot. But in any ways, there are various ways of getting fine details with oil pastels. If you're interested in that, you can always check out my video of how to get fine details with oil pastels. I will link that up in the cards as well as in the video description below. Do check that out if you are interested. And I will also link all the other Zodiac themed paintings I've done so far, if you have missed them by any chance, as all in the video description below, so that you can check them out as well if you once again are interested. This video I kept comparatively shorter, because what I did in this particular painting is pretty much similar to last 5 or 6 of these Zodiac themed mixed media series. I followed the same guidelines. Obviously the subject matter and the composition and everything changes, but the process I'm following is very much the same. So I'm not going into every nook and cranny and of the details that I am doing here. It's the same format: first watercolor, then oil pastel, and then layering and layering and layering of oil pastels till I feel that it's perfectly fine. On the body of the ram, you'll see that there's a lot of areas that I'm leaving a lot of texture. I'm not pushing my clay shaper tool or using my clay shaper tool as much as I used in the background or so, letting a lot of those textures show, because his face is all covered with fur or hair or whatever you want to call it, and I do want it to make some of these textures show. Now on the right side of his face, I first did the dark layer first, and I then came back with grays and whites to form a lighter layer. Now once I finishing this fire thing with all my orange, yellow, and even some purples, then I will show some of the reflection of the fire on his face. So I will layer some shades of yellow and orange, like I started right now, so to kind of mimic the reflection of the fire on his face. This is something I like to do when I bring together a lot of elements in a painting which are not necessarily there in the reference photo. I try to portray the effect of one of the subjects in the composition on the other, or sometimes I will show reflection of the background colors on the subject to make it all come together, so it all adheres together and looks like one painting and not 3 or 4 different elements in the composition. And that is again something I like to do. Not necessarily everybody has to do, not necessarily everybody has to like that way of doing things, but I'm sharing my process and my thought process rather, and you can beg to differ from it, so that's totally up to the viewer. On the right side of the face, the horn I painted on the right side, I did a very different color profile than the one on the left side. And that's because the left side is kind of in the shadows, in the dark, so I kind of made it reflect more of the background colors. On the right side, however, I tried to keep it true to the light source location, which is a little fire in the Aries woman hands, Aries goddess hands, and doing that I brought in a lot of yellows and oranges and brown on the right side of the horn, and tried to keep it true to the location of the light source and the hand. You have to be very careful when you are painting all of these colors of blue and brown together, and then you're trying to put yellow on top. You can see that on the top edge right hand side, some of the areas kind of try to show a little bit of green, because yellow and blue together makes green. So when you blend them together, it kind of becomes green. So you have to carefully go place one color next to and on top of other, and not make sure that you do not get some colors which absolutely do not belong in this whole entire area. I'm again putting in some more oranges to kind of mimic the effect of light or fire. Putting in a few little stars in the background, although eventually I kind of thought that these stars were probably not very necessary, because the painting was already quite busy. It has a lot of visual elements already asking for your individually for your attention, viewers attention, so probably not, it's best not to add more. So I did not even do a lot of details on the stars. I could have totally omitted it anyways. Onto the body of the Aries goddess, kind of doing the skin first, the hands and the back. So for that I do the darker areas first. I'll put in some browns and purples first, and then go over with the flesh tones on top of that. So lights and darks, after I put them in, I blend them together, and then comes adjusting of lights and darks by adding more layers of colors, whether it's purple or blue or brown, depending on the different lights and shadows. Here you will see a lot more purple in the shadows, because I'm trying to mimic the colors of the surrounding galaxy a little bit. I do not want to put blue necessarily on the body, so purple is my next best choice. And I personally feel that purple for shadow really looks good than browns and blues a lot of time. Obviously it depends on subject to subject, painting to painting. A little bit of swirly element to the hair. Once again, not really very realistic here. I'm just going with a very surreal look and feel here. I first put very dark colors in the hair, lots of blues, browns, and really very little bit of black too. On the white cloth, I am putting blues, purples first as for the shadow areas. Once I have the darker areas put in for the hair, I'm going with some dark grays, and I'll also do a little bit of white highlights and push a lot of them back into the dark base layer of the hair to kind of give the illusion of the three-dimensional look of hair onto the little white cloth on the body, and finishing it off with white. That pretty much brings us to the end of the painting, which always makes me ask you to give me a thumbs up if you like it. That means the whole world. And obviously share your thoughts, your comments, your feedback with me in the comment section. That also makes me feel very good and motivates me a lot. And if you have not already subscribed to my channel, consider subscribing because I put out 2 new videos every single week. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon.